Hey, listeners, and welcome to Space Uncensored, the podcast where we demystify space and bring you the untold stories behind the scenes. I'm Andrea, I am your innovation evangelist, and I will be your guide through the galaxies and beyond. Today, I am really excited because we will demystify the space with Katie King, a vanguard in microgravity research and a pioneering CEO at the helm of her own space medicine enterprise. With a rich background that includes PhD in nanotechnology from the University of Cambridge and an influential internship at NASA. Katie herself is at the forefront of using low orbit, Earth orbit for terrestrial benefit, all while really championing sustainability space. And as you know, I'm a big sucker for sustainability, so it's really, down the alley. Katie, it's such a pleasure to have you on board. Welcome to Space Uncensored.
Oh, brilliant. And lovely to be here. And great to speak with you. I'm really looking forward to speaking and uncovering a lot to do with space.
Awesome. Your path is truly inspiring and it's also very innovative. From your time at NASA to founding your own space medicine company, can you maybe walk us through, how did you arrive there and what were some of the pivotal experiences which propelled you towards this unique intersection of space and health?
Yeah, so great question. So I would say that actually it's been quite a windy path. It wasn't like something that I wanted to do from being very young. So it's been a very windy path, which I think is quite normal actually in life. So I always loved space and was always very inspired by astronauts. That was always something that I wanted to be and still would love to be, whatever. We still have our dreams. And yes, so I finished my PhD and I was determined to get a job in the space industry as a scientist and found that there weren't many opportunities, particularly not in the UK. There were some in the States, none here, but green card, etc. So couldn't get a job over there. And I found that really short-sighted because in my eyes, science and commercial science in space is pivotal and is going to be so important for the change and like the use of low Earth orbit. And I just thought like, oh my gosh, like I really need this job, whatever the job is. So two very pivotal things. One was going to the International Space University for a summer program, which I did in 2022. And I met my co-founders and this whole idea and everything came from there. So like, that's where it was birthed really with us all together. So that was really pivotal. But it was going from something theoretical to then being like, okay, let's make this happen. Let's make this real. So like we looked into all the different science research that's done on the space station to see like what could benefit humankind. And there's so much incredible science that like benefits healthcare on Earth, which is never really spoken about. And it was like, right, okay, pinpointed this idea, which is to do with manufacturing drugs in space. And then just decided like, let's make this happen and make that impact real.
You touch on so many topics, right? You touch on the entrepreneurship and how you break from actually an idea into becoming an entrepreneur, and then on the critical topic, which is creating drugs in space and using the technology, which is, in space. I personally really love the idea that on a space station, that's where we are, right? Our planet is a space station. We just don't often realize it.
Well, that's true.
Your company really stands on the forefront of microgravity research, and you've spoken yourself that you exploring the opportunities and the potential of low orbit. Can you tell us a little bit more? What does it actually mean for people maybe who are not so familiar with the terminology and bring that alive?
Yes, of course. So low Earth orbit is an incredible place where gravity is at like micro levels. So when certain like life as we know it has evolved on Earth under gravity. So when you remove gravity from like live things, they start acting very differently because one of their main cues is now missing. So what that means is that But practically what that means is that diseases can develop faster in space. Aging happens faster in space, also to do with radiation. And in what we're using it for is crystals develop differently in space. So these things can, like, research in this environment can really benefit like healthcare back on Earth, because we can discover drugs that minimize this disease modeling, like minimize how quickly it grows, and think, okay, well, if we can minimize that in space, then that same drug should be able to work really well on Earth. So it's like, it's just kind of, you have to think outside of the box. And I think that's what I like, is because I'm a scientist, that's my background. And I was never really taught about the effects of microgravity. And you just think like, okay, if the like such an important and powerful force is now missing, basic phenomena can start changing. And like, how can we use that? What can that application be? And I think as low Earth orbit economy starts growing, we're going to start seeing a lot more use cases that haven't yet even been discovered.
It's fascinating. And I think that, there are probably questions in people's minds saying, okay, so how does Katie actually do it, right? Does she have a venture in a low orbit, or does she create a low orbit environment on Earth? Can you walk us through a little bit, what does it actually mean from a scientific perspective to be able to do these experiments? And where do you do them?
Yeah, really good question. So in terms of like simulating microgravity on Earth, there are a few pieces of technology that allow you to do that. So one is in parabolic flights, which you might have seen, the Vomit Comet, where people are going like this.
Right.
And that can get you about 30 seconds of microgravity, or just like a drop tower. So you drop something, and when it's in terminal velocity, things act as if it might in microgravity. But like the length of microgravity that you get and the quality of the microgravity can differ. But if you actually go into a microgravity environment, you get this much longer time and like a higher quality of microgravity than you can achieve on Earth. So what we're going to be doing is going to low Earth orbit, because we need long periods of time to form these crystals. So we need to get there, but there will be other applications where you don't need to go all the way into space. You can just you can use some of these Earth-based options instead.
So, for you to do the experiments, you will actually go into low orbit, right? So, and I think that new space economy and low orbit economy are just booming, and I don't think that they're booming fast enough, because people don't pay enough attention and don't realize how much of opportunity is there, right? Not only for health, but for other areas. So, would you use an external provider to be able to go to low orbit, or how would you do that?
Yeah, good. Yeah, there are lots of different companies that can provide access to low Earth orbit. So what we're doing is partnering with people who can get us there, so they can just test our experiment. We're not looking to launch the entire thing and then return it completely ourselves. I know some other companies do that and are looking into that. But for us, we want to work with those providers so that we're just focusing on the equipment to make the drugs.
Awesome. You touched on the benefits, which are obviously from the field, especially for health. Why don't we talk a little bit about, what are some of these cutting edge in, research coming out, and what can you see in the near future to be a tangible healthcare solution for us on Earth?
Yeah. So there's some amazing research coming out. I think one of them are organoids. So when you haven't got gravity play, cells can grow more freely and form like 3D structures that you wouldn't be able to form on Earth. They kind of just grow and go all flat and squashed against the plate. So if you can form these organoids, they're sort of all of the same cell making mini, well, it can depend on which organ, but mini 3D models of organs. That allows you to do a lot more drug testing, etc., because you can see how something reacts in 3D compared to traditional methods. So there's a lot of interesting research coming out there. Can we form these organs or form tumors in space and then test drugs on them to see what works best? And that's really like it's a big push, because we want to move away from like animal models and get to more accurate 3D models that respond more closely to a human response. So there's a lot of work there. I find that very interesting. Another one in healthcare would be, let's think, disease progression and drug development. So again, like how a disease, subtly different, how a disease accelerates, and then testing drugs to see if you can slow that down.
I just turned 50 last year. And of course, when you are on that intersection, my grandma will turn 100. You really asking yourself, a lot about health and what is available to you here on Earth, right? And I think that there is a lot of people who are just not educated or don't have enough sufficient information. And there is also very little taught at school, around low orbit, and not only from health, but for sustainability of farming or, materials which you can gain from the space. Where do you see some of these challenges in terms of, and how could we overcome them in terms of educating the public, educating the youth, get more investors interested and more youth interested? Because I think ultimately it's about people going into that area and also people investing into the area, right?
Yeah, I think it's a really big problem, like getting that education in young. And that's a big passion of mine, actually, is, okay, just introducing microgravity to children when they're, preteen age, because when they get into the work environment, microgravity and low Earth orbit economy and all of that is going to be so much bigger than it is now. So they need to be prepared. They need to be thinking of these things. So I think that's really paramount. And the way to kind of get that happening and get the investment in, I believe, is to do with vision painting. I paint that future, paint that vision. What does it look like? Because that inspires people and then motivates creativity to solve different problems or creating these different solutions. So what does it look like? What's the potential that Earth orbit can bring? Because that's what kind of captures your imagination when you're a kid as well. Like, for me, it was seeing like a floating water globule next to an astronaut. And I was like, oh my gosh, I want to see that. I want to do that. It's very simple. So, saying to them, there are going to be thousands of humans living in space, working and doing science, just being scientists, but in space. Like that just like paints a vision in children's heads. And also for investors as well, it's like, okay, that's the big vision, but you need to have more stepping stones to present to them before that big vision.
No, definitely. And I think that, one of our guests also was painting the vision, which I really like, is that every job which we do on Earth will be ultimately in space, right? And I think that often we don't realize it, that everything which we do here, we can do somewhere else. And people don't see themselves because they ultimately think you can only be a scientist or astronaut, right? But there's so much more around the whole new space economy. So speaking about the new generation, I know that you are a really strong advocate for women in tech. And there is a big underrepresentation, not only in technology, but in space particular. And your work for Tech She Can, this is your venture. How are you planning to inspire the next generation of female scientists and entrepreneurs?
Yeah, so getting more young girls into technology is, I think, very important, because the ratio is still not where it should be. So Tech She Can is a brilliant charity that I've worked for maybe I think 5 years now, which is crazy. And it's all about trying to attack the problem from all different angles. So from the education angle, from a policy angle, from like how to help women who are already in those tech careers, like getting them like help and mentorship. So it's kind of going all ages and all different angles to address the problem. And for me, like the education part is so critical. Just for both boys and girls need to see women in tech. nanotechnology. It's not just for the girls to see. It shouldn't be weird. It shouldn't be abnormal. And I think like the more visibility that we can give, the better, and to normalize everything. So yeah, I think like in terms of inspiring the next generation, it's a tough one. I think like showing that there's like a want and a need for these people um and like you don't have to be the best to do it by any stretch of the imagination. Like you just need to be able to try and to be able to work hard at something. But you don't need to be the best by any stretch of the imagination. um and it's like, okay, like have your vision and just go for it, and like um get help along the way. Don't be afraid to ask for help. And like, yeah, I think it's inspiring them to think like, yes, there's a place for you, do it. Like it's growing and changing and you need to be a part of it, and we want you to be a part of it. But it can be hard. It can be hard if you can't see someone there. It's scary because you're like, oh my gosh, I feel really out of place. I've definitely had my fair share of feeling like I don't belong, but it's changing. It is changing. So yeah, let's see where we are at in a few decades' time.
So hopefully it will not be decades. Hopefully it will take a little bit shorter.
Yeah, I hope so.
If people want to get involved with your initiative, Tech She Can, how can they do that?
Yeah. So I would say we've got a website online. So I'm always looking for people to be Tech She Can champions. So that involves like going into schools and speaking to young kids about technology. And we've got lots of different like lessons and stuff that can be presented. So if you want to get involved and be right on the front line speaking to those kids, then Tech She Can's got those opportunities. And if you've got a business or a company that wants to get involved as well, then there's lots of opportunities there. So get online and you'll see that there's a lot there to get involved with.
We definitely will post also the links and the recommendation with a podcast so people can go and check out the sites. For the ones who listen to it and who dream is a career in space tech or space medicine, what would be your advice?
I would say space tech and space medicine itself is quite new. Particularly on a commercial site, like there's a lot going on with space agencies and like pure science and academia. So it's hard. I don't want to say like, oh yeah, it's super easy when it comes to space medicine, because there aren't that many opportunities, unfortunately. I do think that that's going to change. Maybe you are one of those change makers that brings in something new. And I would really encourage that as well, because that's how we change the world, is by making these changes and creating things that are new. If for more like space tech, there are opportunities, and the whole industry is growing, and it's going to grow, I think, very quickly in the next 5 years. I think we're going to be in a very different way in 5 years' time, which is really exciting. So keep your ears to the ground, look online, contact as many people on LinkedIn as you can, get those conversations going, and like be a person behind like the contact. Like, have a conversation with these different people if you can, and be persistent. Be annoyingly persistent. It's also what I'd say, and then you'll get there.
I like that you use the word annoyingly persistent, because it is a positive spin to it, right? As a CEO of the company, right? And you spoke about the challenges and the difficulties about the private enterprise. How do you see the interaction between smaller companies like yours, if partnering and interacting with the large space agencies and really together shaping the future of healthcare?
Yeah, so we're supported by the European Space Agency and also from the UK Space Agency, and it's been fantastic. I think there is a recognition that this link is really needed between the agencies and the innovators, because startups have the benefit of being able to move much faster, because in agencies they've got different things that they need to adhere to, and it just moves a little bit slower. So it's a great synergy if you can get that, like all the startups linked in with the agencies as well. So I think that it's not perfect yet, but there is recognition that there's a need for that relationship. So, and the European Space Agency have been great in supporting us so far.
I wonder if I am, for example, a drug producer in Germany or Sweden or somewhere, right? And I produce traditional drugs, and I obviously invest a lot of research. How do I partner with companies like yours? Do I have my own, department which looks how can I utilize space for my development, or do I work with with your company, or do I go through a space agency? How does the ecosystem of interconnecting all of these partners work?
So it's a complex network, that's for sure. So typically, drug manufacturers don't have a space arm, because that hasn't been their need or their drive for a long time. It will be interesting to see if they later down the line do develop space arms or branches. So I'm curious to see that happen. But for now, it would be working with startups like us and agencies can help to get that access to space. So working with agencies means that there's sometimes like a subsidized cost to get to space, because they want they want to encourage that first step of these like drug companies, etc., to try space. So there are some benefits like that. But if there's a drug manufacturer who's like, oh, I'm really curious, then it would be finding us or speaking with the agency to get their recommendation and think, oh, we want to try it, but we don't know how to go about it, because they will have the database and be able to find who's better suited to make it happen.
It's actually really surprising to hear and to see that there is still on the commercial side, from a traditional business perspective, still so little where they invest into future research and understanding, that it's so Earth focused, right, rather than space focused. And what are the reasons behind it? Because it's the moment you open that Pandora box and you start to learn about what space can do, what, not only the technology, but, resources. And so where do you think is the boundary before the commercial industry that today they don't pour money into it and don't really, because I think it deserves more than that $1.4 trillion, which is forecasted to be in. I think it should be much more. What do you think are the boundaries? Is it the skills in the companies and the lack of knowledge about space, or what would it break?
Well, I mean, I think it's a really multifaceted problem, unfortunately. I think there is a lack of skills because we haven't needed to develop these skills yet. So this next generation will be and this is what I find exciting, is getting the health experts and the space experts together in the same room so that they can be the health space experts together. Like, they'll then develop those skills. And then I think the next generation, like, those jobs will exist. You will have a, health microgravity expert, and that's what someone's been trained in. But for this first step, we need to mesh those skills and learn from each other so that that job then exists later down the line. I think that one of the things preventing or like inhibiting it is because traditionally space is expensive. It's not easy. But accessibility was far worse pre-SpaceX than it is now. And it's only like with SpaceX coming in, changing the whole scene, things are now much cheaper. Accessibility is much easier. And these are things that are critical for applications because they need to know, okay, can I regularly get to space? Can I afford this? So is it even worth investing to do research there? Like, because if I can't get up there regularly and cheaply, what's the point in even trying in the first place? But that's changing now because now it's like, okay, yes, it is more regular. Yes, it is getting more affordable. So now it's worth investing in research because the infrastructure's now like where it never was before. So I think there's a lot of change. I think, yeah,
Yes.
a lot of change is to come.
Yeah, I wonder if I was thinking back and I was thinking, for a certain period of time when I grew up, it was very, very cool to be a banker, right? Or to be a trader or to be an economist or accountant. And I think, we should start like a wave of starting. I think it's about marketing, right? To start to market these jobs about space. And that I think the moment it would create that desire of this is something which will create the next wave of employment. More people would go into it.
Mm.
So yeah, I think that now nobody wants to be a banker anymore because there are so many bankers. So I think that everybody wants to be now an engineer, maybe. Definitely, my kids wants to be astrophysicists, and second want to be a volcanologist. So hopefully
Amazing.
they will contribute a little bit. Yeah, I think and I'm very, very proud of them. I want to shift a little bit into the sustainability because I know it's a really passion point for you as well. And how do you think the companies in space can address the concerns about sustainability and the environmental footprint here on Earth and make it better for us?
Yeah. So sustainability is so important, as we know, like taking care of our planet and making sure that we don't screw it up for future generations. And I think, you know, we've been used to thinking of our planet just as Earth. But now with how much we're using space, that is expanding. And we have to take care of low Earth orbit too, because there actually isn't that much space around there. So if we just throw things into space and don't take care of cleaning it up or making sure that the death part of their life cycle is taken care of, we could trap ourselves in here because it's like, if you think about shipwrecks, it's like, imagine like with space debris, imagine that every shipwreck was to just stay on the surface and imagine how many
Yeah,
boats would be floating around. It's basically the same
crazy.
principle. Yeah,
I
it's very,
like that. It's such a great comparison. I love
yeah,
it. This is so cool.
yes. So it's like, imagine once, if you have those collisions, like all the mess and all the junk just stays there to make more mess.
Mm.
So I think like we could end up trapping ourselves in where you can't get out without being too risky in getting hit by something. So, I mean, that's obviously a bit dramatic from me, but if we don't do anything about it, then that could happen. So we need to make sure that like companies who use it regularly need to ensure that they're doing so sustainably. But it's difficult because that requires regulation. That requires lots of countries agreeing with each other. And it's
Yes.
very hard for one country who has had a lot of money and had a lot of access to space to then say to others like, no, you can't have access because we've used it so much. It's like, it's difficult. It's difficult, but it does need like that international rule setting, basically.
Mm.
So
I think there is a big complexity between the different international government agencies, right, to partner together and find a common language. I think that's probably will be the biggest challenge across the development and the investments, which will be who owns space, right? Because that's the biggest
yeah,
concern.
exactly that. So it'll be
So,
very interesting.
we spoke, obviously, you touched on SpaceX a little bit, which is such a big driver and what happened, the move from the traditional space economy into new space economy. What are some of the trends in the space industry and which really excite you right now? Which you think, wow, this is like moving into the right direction, and I really, I think this is awesome.
Oof, with SpaceX or just in general?
No, generally in space. Yes, in space.
Oh, so the thing that I'm super excited about, particularly for this year, other returns vehicles coming and online and being tested. So if you think about the way I've kind of picture it is, if you think about the satellite industry and how many satellites we now have compared to like even 5 years ago, that was made possible because SpaceX changed the cost of launch. And it's like, okay, well,
Right.
now it's like so much cheaper to send stuff up. So like, we can send it up. We don't need to get those back necessarily. That's not well, we do, but yeah, sustainability.
Sustainability.
But when the returns vehicles come online, that's when we can start really manufacturing things, because there's going to be a huge boom, because to get manufacturing, you need to get there and you need to get back down very safely. There are quite a few companies working on this return technology. So you've got Spaceforge in the UK, you've got Varda, you've got the exploration company, Atmos Space Cargo. There are others as well. And a lot of them are doing their maiden flights this year. So it's exciting, because once that becomes a stable part of the infrastructure, in orbit manufacturing, that industry, I think, is going to go just like the satellite industry went crazy.
That's really interesting when you call it like an in-orbit manufacturing, right? Can you maybe share some example? What are some of the sectors where you see will have this big boom of in-orbit manufacturing?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, we are one of those. So,
Yes,
that
of
is
course.
our plug for that with manufacturing drugs. But semiconductor manufacturing is a big one. I think Spaceforge are focusing on, so you can get higher quality chips for use on Earth. Then you can get like fiber optics and what else is big actually? Yeah. Fiber optics, and also like organoids will be a big one as well. So like creating these cell structures and then bringing them back down. So so there's quite a lot that will benefit from that returns vehicle technology being ready.
It's incredible to imagine that you would send something through through this technology up into a lower orbit. Then the drugs will be getting manufactured. You will send it back, and we will consume it as humans. It's just like it's so do you envision? I think that one of the things which probably also people have in mind, and how do you use AI in the work which you're doing? And maybe a follow-up question is, when this going back and forth will be really democratized, right? So that the cost will be, the right cost for everybody to be able to do it. How do you envision will it happen in the low orbit, right? Will it happen through robots? Will how can you see the process actually evolving?
Yeah, so with AI, I'll answer that bit first. We currently, we're not using it currently. We will need to use it. I think it's the way I kind of see it is like it's a tool that we need to know how to use. That we need to know how we can use it to like increase our productivity more. It's not going to disappear. We need to integrate it. So working out how to use it, because it's a very different way of thinking. So we haven't done that yet, but thinking of ways in which we can do that. Yeah, so I'm not sure yet, but I think it's going to have a massive impact. What was the second part of the question? Sorry.
So I think that, if people listen to this conversation, they say, okay, now Katie said, once these vehicles, once it's democratized, her company will be able to produce the drugs in lower orbit. But how would it work? Will you send it on the vehicle, and there will be, robot installations within these spaceships, which will be able to manufacture, or will it be humans who will go up, who will, observe and make sure it's happening?
Yeah.
So I don't think it will be like in Willy Wonka, where you had the Oompa Loompas, right, which were creating the chocolate. So I think it would be, who will be a Oompa Loompas in the lower orbit? How will the drugs be manufactured there?
Yeah, so our design is an automated system so that it doesn't require humans, but so that limits that like opens up like who we can fly with. We don't need a space station, etc. But I think
Mhm.
later down the line, we will need like humans up there for us. This is, as we then aim to do more and more complex things. I've got big visions and dreams for the company, away from manufacturing as well. So like, I would want us to have like scientists, astronauts as part of the company who go and do the science and come back. That would be a great vision. That's what I want to see happen. Start small and then, we'll get there. Uh, so yeah, at the moment, automated because astronaut time is so expensive. But then who knows for the future? Who knows?
That's wonderful. As we going till the end of our discussion, you are a CEO and you are a scientist and you support charities. There's so much in your life happening. How do you balance it? How do you remain healthy physically and mentally? Are there any routines which you do which you would recommend to others?
Oh, that's a good question. To be honest, being really honest, I don't think I have much of a balance. I wouldn't necessarily recommend it. Um, in terms of like well-being, I try journal a lot, which helps just get all the noise from the head like down on paper. I find that very helpful. I do try and like get out and exercise as much as I can. But there are some times when that's do manageable, and then other weeks where it's like, oh no. um, so yeah, I think it's to be very honest, still working out and still trying to find that balance.
Mm. And is there any book which you would recommend to the audience? Something which really inspired you?
Actually, there was a book that I read recently, which is by Stephen Bartlett. So he does a podcast called Diary of a CEO, and he's great. And his book is called Happy Sexy Millionaire. And so he like
Mhm.
made his millions when he was in his 20s, etc. And it's about like how society defines success and like actually what it means to be happy and how that's like very different or can be very different.
All right.
It's got some brilliant one-liners in there, that you can just like almost meditate on and be like, wow, that's so true, about like uncertainty and taking risks and just very, very good. So I loved reading that because it kind of
Mhm.
ingrained, it helped be like, yeah, I knew that. Why do I, you know, get bothered by X? Because that doesn't actually matter in the grand scheme of things. And so I really enjoyed it. It's very easy to read and it's great.
Before I let you go, and as we spoke about the literature you were reading, is there any quote or mantra which was guiding your journey, which you would like to share?
Yeah. So I have one which uh might not be very like inspirational in some ways, but it's just 3 words, which is own your shit. And sorry if I can't say that. Feel free to bleep that out. But it's just like take responsibility. So it's like take
No,
responsibility.
you don't need to translate it. I'm sure that everybody understands.
That's sad. Sorry. Yeah, just like
No,
own
it's
it.
brilliant. It's brilliant. It's so simple. Yeah, it's so great. Katie, your dedication to advance human health through space technology is really nothing short of revolutionary. You are such an inspiration. And I want to really thank you for sharing your insights with us today. Um, everything which we touched on it, how your journey started, how you started your company, your vision where you want to take it, and the role that which nanotechnology can play for us in the future and really help us to have a more sustainable life here on earth. I think it's absolutely amazing, and I'm sure that you are a role model for so many listeners today and hopefully in the future. So to the listeners, I really hope you enjoyed today's episode. Please like us, subscribe us on our journey, and as we expand the Space Uncensored universe. Katie, once more time, thank you so much. It was absolutely amazing having you with us today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's been really great to chat. Thank you.